Okay, up next we've got circle equations, right? So we're going to start with the equation of a circle, which our general form is going to be x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared. And circles are actually some of the easiest equations we look at, right? Because it's always going to be in this form, right? Or at least you have to get it into this form. And then you need two things to be able to graph your circle. You need the center and the radius, and that's going to come straight from your equation. So your center is at the point h comma k, and your radius, shocker, is r. Okay, now, two things. Your h and your k are both opposite signs. Both of them, not just the h. And then your radius, common mistake, is you get used to it equaling the radius, so then you put that number here, but it's not. You're going to be equal to a number. Your radius is the square root of that number. So don't make that common mistake. All right, so types of problems that we're going to see. First, you're just going to have to find the center and the radius when you're given an equation. All right, so these are written in standard form. All right, so my center, call C, right, that's at the point HK. So H is inside with the X, K is inside with the Y, and both of them are going to be opposite signs. So in here I have a positive 1 inside with the X, so that means my H is really a negative 1. And then I have a minus 2, so that's really going to be a positive 2. And bam, there's my center. The radius, take the square root of what it equals. Square root of 9 is 3. Done. Easy peasy. HK and R. Right, now number 2 still is easy, just looks kind of weird, right? I don't have any parentheses here. I don't have an H, which means H is 0. So if you don't have parentheses, it just means that value is 0. And then my K is going to be a positive 3. Now this one's also a little weird because 10's not a perfect square. Just leave it. So my radius would be the square root of 10, right? Don't have to worry about typing that in or anything. Right? Then you're also going to have to write equations. So you have two ways. I'm going to have you write the equation, and I give you the radius and the center, and then I'm also going to give you a circle, or I give you a graph, and you have to write the equation. So if I want you to write the equation given the radius and the center, we're going to do the opposite of what we just did. So I'm going to take my values and plug them into my equation. So remember, H and K are opposite signs. So here, when I start typing in or start plugging in, I'm going to have parentheses and then X. My H is a negative 1, which means in my equation, it's going to be a plus 1. Squared, don't forget the squareds. Plus, always plus in between. And then same thing here. I have a negative 1 for Y, so I'm going to put a plus 1 in there for my K value. And that's going to equal my radius squared. So 2 squared equals 4. Common mistake is forgetting that square and square root when you're putting the radius in and out. All right, and then over here we have our graph. So to write the equation of a circle, I need to know my center and my radius. So the center for this problem is at 3, 2. Okay, that was easy. So when I start to write my equation, I have a positive 3 for H, so I'm going to put it in as a negative 3. And then I have a positive 2 for K, so that's going to go in as a negative 2. And then I need my radius. Well, the radius of a circle goes from the center of the circle to any point on the edge of the circle. Now, I can't count diagonally. Doesn't work that way when we're counting on coordinate grids or the plane. So what we're going to do is either go up, down, left, or right because I can count vertically or horizontally. So in this case, I'm going to go to the right. Doesn't matter. You're just going to go up, down, left, or right. And I'm going to count. So I got 1, 2, 3. So my radius is 3. Square it. My equation has to equal 9. So circles can be very, very quick and easy. The only hard part we get to is when it's not in standard form. Let me switch papers here. So if it is not in standard form, okay, we're going to have to do what we call completing the square, which we've seen. We just got to review it really quick. So when I want to complete the square, I want to rewrite a trinomial as a perfect square binomial, which means I want to write it as like a plus b squared, right? Because that's what my equations look like, right? In my circle equations that we just talked about, I have x minus something squared. So I need to write my equation to get this parentheses, right? Because they're right down here. They're all multiplied out. So reviewing completing the square. To begin with, we're going to get the x's on one side, the variables on one side, and everything else on the other. So I'm going to move that 5 over to the other side. So I have x squared plus 8x over here, and then 0 plus 5 is 5. Then I'm going to put a box in there. And whatever I do to one side, I have to do to the other. So if I add a box to the left, I have to add a box to the right. And then to figure out what goes inside that box, we do b divided by 2 squared, right? And b is the number that's in front of the x term, or x to the first power, right? So in this case, my b is 8. 8 divided by 2 is 4, and 4 squared is 16. So 16 is what I'm going to add to both sides, because you have to do it to both sides if you're not going to change your equation, which we don't want to change it. We want to work with it. All right, then I can rewrite, well, let's see, we'll change colors again. Then I can rewrite this left side as something squared, all right? So to figure out what goes in the parentheses, we do b divided by 2, right? And what I mean by that is that I'm always going to have an x here, and then I'm going to take whatever my b divided by 2 is. So I'm going to put a plus 4. That's the same thing. If I were to do x plus 4 squared, I would get x squared plus 8x plus 16. So these two are equal. I'm just rewriting it. That's the whole reason that we do this, because I want to rewrite this so that it has that pattern, so that I can write it as x plus 4 squared. And then on the right side, we're just going to do 5 plus 16, which is 21. Right? We're not solving. This is as far as I need to go. Okay? Now over here, another thing, all right, and before I complete the square, I need that number in front of my x squared to be a 1. So the first thing we got to do is get rid of that 2 that's up there, because I want it to be a 1. So to get rid of it, I'm going to divide every single term by 2. All right, everything. So then I'm going to have x squared plus 5x plus 2 equals 6. Then I'm going to keep going with my process. So then I'm going to go ahead and move my 2 over. So I have x squared plus 5x, and then over here I have a 4. Then I'm going to put my box in there. Right? Now this one's a little gross because 5 is an odd number, but there's my b, and I'm going to take half of my b and square it. Well, to figure out half of 5, I have to do 5 divided by 2. And that's not going to go in there evenly, so I'm just going to leave that as 5 over 2. Then I'm going to square it. So if I'm squaring a fraction, I can square the top, square the bottom. So 5 squared is 25, 2 squared is 4. So, all right, that gross poor fraction is what goes in the box. Okay, just because you get a fraction for something doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. Okay, fractions have feelings too. You can't ignore them just because they're not as pretty. All right, then I'm going to switch to my parentheses. So I'm going to go ahead and put my x in there. All right, and my squared. Then I got to figure out what goes in here. Well, that comes back to before I squared for the box. So that's going to be a plus 5 over 2. The sign in here keeps the sign that's up here. Your box is always a plus every time. All right, and then that's going to equal, and then 4 plus 25 over 4, OMG, we got to add fractions. So I got 4 over 1 plus 25 over 4. All right, common denominator is 4. So I'm going to multiply top and bottom here. So 16 over 4 plus 25 over 4. So that's going to give me 41 over 4. Super gross. You're not going to have very many fractions, if any. You might get lucky and not have any. But in case you do, that's why I want to throw one in there. Just keep going. Push through it. You remember fractions. Okay, I promise it doesn't take that long because they're going to be more like what we did the first example. Right? But with circles, the only thing that changes is that I have to complete the square twice because I need an x parentheses and I need a y parentheses. All right, so to begin with, I still need all my variables on one side and my constant on the other. So I'm going to subtract 20 from both sides. And I'm going to go ahead and put my x's and my y's together. I'm going to separate them. So what I mean is I'm going to have x squared plus this, or minus the 4x. leave a space. Then I'm going to have my plus y squared with the positive 10y, leave a space. And then 0 minus 20 is negative 20. Okay, we're leaving a space because I'm going to have two boxes this time. I'm going to complete the square for the x's. So I have to have a box on both sides. And then I'm going to complete the square for the y's. So I'm going to have two boxes. Okay, so whatever you do to one side, you have to do to the other. Same steps. It's just we're doing it twice. We got to do it for the x's. We got to do it for the y's. All right, so to go in the x box, I'm going to take half of b. So my b is negative 4. So negative 4 divided by 2 is negative 2. Squared is positive 4. Remember, this box is always positive. So I'm going to put that on both sides. To figure out the y's, half of 10 is 5, and 5 squared is 25. It did not give me a very big box there. All right, and now that's going to let me write parentheses. So just for the x parentheses, right, I'm going to have x, and then half of negative 4 is negative 2 squared. Plus, and I'm going to do it again for my y's. So I have my y, and then half of 10 is 5. Remember, you keep the same sign when you put it in your parentheses. And then that's going to equal, so negative 20 plus 4 is negative 16. Negative 16 plus 25 is a positive 9. And bam, there's my circle equation. So the actual problem wants us to find the center and the radius. So my center here is going to be a positive 2, negative 5. And then my radius is the square root of 9, which is 3. So that's easy peasy stuff like we did in the beginning. We just have to do some work to get to our equation that makes it easy peasy. Okay, one more of these. All right, so right off the bat, I notice that I have, change colors, that I have a 3 in front of the x squared and the y squared. When we do circles, that number is always going to be the same in front of both of them, right? If they're different, that changes our shape a little bit. So they're always going to be the same number, and you need that number to be 1. So I'm going to divide everything, every single thing on both sides, even at 0, by 3. Now, the 0 divided by 3 is not going to do anything, but we still do it. So that's going to leave me with x squared plus y squared minus 4x minus 6y plus 8 equals 0. And now we can complete the square for both x and y. So I'm going to start by subtracting the 8 and getting my x's and y's together. So we're going to have x squared minus 4x and then plus y squared minus 6y equals a negative 8. Make sure you leave room for boxes. And whatever I do to one side, I got to do to the other. All right, now this x is the same setup we had over for our first example. So half of negative 4 is negative 2. Squared is 4. So I'm going to put a 4 on both sides. All right, now my y has a negative 6. So half of negative 6 is negative 3. Squared is positive 9. And then my parentheses, all right, I have my x, and then I take half of my b, which is a negative 2, squared, plus, same thing for my y's, half of negative 6 is negative 3. And then I add. So negative 8 plus 4 is negative 4. Negative 4 plus 9 is 5. So there's my equation in standard form. From here, I can go ahead and get my center and my radius. And my center is at a positive 2, positive 3. And the radius, 5 is not a perfect square. So we're going to leave that as just the square root of 5, right? No ugly decimals unless it specifically asks you to and tells you where to round.